Well, good morning. Thank you once again for joining us on a Sunday morning video service, even though we're filming it on Saturday. Um, just a couple of things to go over today. Our ladies group is going to be kicking off with our new book called When You Pray. We're starting the class on this Thursday. We'll have our class here at 11 o'clock at the Father's house for you ladies who want to join us for that in person. And then at 6:30, we will have a Zoom class for all of those who don't want to come into the church and join us. Again, it's called When You Pray, and I think it's going to be a really good study. So hopefully you've got your books. I've got some of your books for the ladies that asked me to order them. If you got a book and I don't know you want to be part of it, please let me know so I can set you up on the email for Zoom. Today is our capital improvement offering. So you know the drill. You can go to thefathershouse.org, click on the giving button, set it up as a one-time gift or a recurring gift. You can mail a check to the Father's House at 133 Bernal Road, San Jose, California, 95119. Or you can bring it to church on Sunday and drop it in our giving boxes. And speaking of offerings, I just wanted to let you know that I do have your tax statement. So those of you who needed them mailed out, I hope I got everybody mailed. If you're in church, I'm going to hand them out so we save the money for the stamp and the envelope. And if not, I'll get it to you by the end of the month. If for some reason there's something wrong on it, please let me know so I can get it corrected to you, so you can file your taxes. And honestly, I think that's really all I have to cover today. So we'll turn the time over to Pastor Carl.
Well, good morning, Father's House. How are you doing today? Having a great day? I trust that you are. The weather's absolutely perfect. Actually, the weather in San Jose has been too good. We need rain. It's getting to a critical point, and I know that Southern California needs rain too. So, you can do anything at this point, you can ask for God's intervention in rain, and that He would intervene. So, yeah. Anyway, that's at least a thought of what something that you can do. My body is itchy because it's so dry. And after I take a shower, it's like I got to slather in lotion, or my body itches. But I guess that's not your problem, but it is mine today. But I'll just have to go ahead and live with it. What else is new? What else is going on? Not much. There's just a transition happening as far as the presidential transition from one president to another. That'll be interesting to see how that all unfolds here in the end. Other than that, we're just kind of here enjoying a mild winter. And I don't know where you are. Maybe you're here in San Jose watching this. Maybe you're in Central Valley, or you're up in Seattle, or wherever you are, and your weather is otherwise. But other than that, that's about all I got to say. Nothing really new. Things are just going on as they usually go on. But so I think that maybe what we'll do is we'll go right into what we've been talking about here in the life of Samuel, or applying lessons to the life of Samuel that I started this series last week, or the first of this year. And my intention was that when I was going through the book of First Samuel, and really the birth of Samuel, my thought was is that in going through that, that I would just talk about the birth and about Hannah for 1 week, and then I would move on into the life of Samuel. But man, after last Sunday, there was so much left unsaid that probably needed to be said. And also just the idea of paying tribute to Hannah, because what Hannah did was, and her prayer was rather remarkable. And it's interesting because what we're going to talk about today is the Song of Hannah that comes after this, and some interesting things that we can learn about God through that, and how it's so close in its construction and its emotion, its affectivity, as to Mary's song. And so there's this part, or the Magnificent, and there's this part of it where it's just beautiful, and I just couldn't get my eyes and my heart off of it, thinking it's probably good to honor Hannah again today, and again to just highlight this whole idea of Samuel, and what it is, this profound gift that God gave to Hannah in the way of Sarah, and in the way of Samuel. But that in that, there's a couple of things that I talked about on a video I didn't talk about on Sunday, and somebody had mentioned, and that was kind of how was it that Elkanah was able to give his son away as well. And so we talked about that a little bit on the video last week, but I didn't in church. And somebody had mentioned it, and the idea that he was able to give his son away, and trusting that what Hannah had heard, Hannah had heard from the Lord, and he was as trusting as Mary as Hannah was, that this was God's divine plan. It's interesting because even with Jesus, or if you think about here with Samuel, I mean, it really all started with the woman. It didn't start with Elkanah, and it didn't start with Joseph. It started with Hannah, and it started with Mary. Hannah's case was somewhat different in that she was barren, and in this barrenness, she was being oppressed by her sister wife, and how in this point, after being oppressed and just mocked year after year after year, she finally turns to God. And when she turns to God, she goes into the temple and begins to pray. Eli, the priest, thinks she's drunk. She says, I'm not drunk. I'm just distressed here, and I've got some business to do with God, and I'm doing that business with God. And so I'm praying because I'm barren. And he says, may it be done to you according to the Lord, to the word, to the will of God. She took that as that her prayer had been answered, and she then went back again, went home, conceived, and gave birth to Samuel. It's interesting, though, and I was thinking about this a little bit more about when she gave birth to Samuel. She says she named him Samuel because I've asked of the Lord. And I started thinking about that, and I thought, well, that's kind of a skinny idea as to, it's like, well, I asked for him and God gave me, so his name's Samuel, and that's what his name means. But I got to thinking about it that there's so many more dynamics in what happened and what the name Samuel really represents in the life of Hannah and who he was ultimately going to become. First thing is that Hannah had this problem, right? That she was being oppressed. There was this problem in her life. And when she had this problem in her life, it finally got big enough to where she realized it wasn't something that she was going to be able to manage. It wasn't something that her and her husband were going to be able to manage, or even at that case, I mean, even you could say maybe even medical, any kind of medical things they could do that was going to help manage the fact or deal with the fact that Hannah was barren. And it also says the Lord closed her womb. And that's probably the idea of the Lord closed her womb, of the Lord didn't permit her to have children, because if she had just kind of fallen into children naturally, maybe she wouldn't have given Samuel away to God. But Samuel was somebody special. And because of that, for him to end up where he needed to end up as a child, as a baby, as a 3-year-old, wouldn't have happened had Hannah not had to travail for this child. So the first thing was is that she had a problem, and her problem was that she was barren. So what she did was she went to prayer and she asked of God. When she asked of God, and what happened was, and as she asked, then what happened is Eli then recognizes what's going on, acknowledges what's happening, and there's this idea where she believes that God has heard her. And so God has heard her. And then as you go on further down in the text, you say that in when she went home with Elkanah, they had relations together. And it says, and the Lord remembered. And the Lord remembered is what it said. And so the idea was, and the Lord remembered, and she conceived and ultimately gave birth to Samuel. And at the end of the day, she says, I'm going to name him Samuel because I've asked of the Lord. But that name means maybe more connected. It means something like this: I'm naming him Samuel because I was barren, and I asked from the Lord, and the Lord remembered me and allowed me to conceive and to give birth to Samuel. Therefore, my horn is exalted. We're going to talk about that. So let's follow this again. I wasn't able to conceive. I asked of God. The Lord heard my prayer. The Lord remembered. And I came and I conceived of Samuel, and he was born. And therefore my horn is exalted. I think the stringing together of all of those things is really what Samuel's name means. It means simply, I have a problem. With that problem, I went to God. God heard, God remembered, and God delivered. Therefore, I am exalted. I exalt in the Lord. So we're going to talk about this idea of the first part of that movement that we're talking about having a problem, being barren, asking of God, God hearing, God remembering, and she conceiving, has everything to do with the end of the day, that at the end she was able to give Samuel away. But there was this idea, this notion of, therefore, my horn is exalted. What does that mean when we talk about a horn being exalted? We're going to read this text here in just a minute. But the idea of a horn, my horn is exalted, what it basically means is that a horn in Jewish times, really, when you think about it in light of a bull, and when you think about the horns of a bull, there's two things that the horns are for a bull. Number one, it's a symbol and a source of its strength, and number two, it's the source of its glory. And so the idea is that whenever you see the horn being talked about in the Old Testament or in Scripture, it's always talking about strength and glory, and it's always talking about, and so it's always talking about the idea of authority to some extent. So we left the story last week, and you can go back and look at the video, but we left the story last week. It says that Hannah, and that when she delivered the young boy over to Eli to be raised in the house of God and to begin to minister to the Lord, it says that Hannah and uh, and Samuel worshiped the Lord there, and then she departed back to her home. Now, I don't know if Hannah's song, if this prayer, hymn, song, it's really a song or a hymn. I don't know if she really, this was something that she worshiped God with there with Samuel, or if this is something that she didn't worship God with within her own synagogue or within her own faith congregation or local community where it was that she lived. But there's some things that are being said in this that we're going to read that I want you to pay attention to. And the first thing is the idea of that her horn is exalted. And in this song, we'll see that it'll mention a horn in the first, I think, first two verses, and it mentions it in the last verses. So there's this idea of the horn being exalted is in the first part of this song and at the end of this song. And so it's kind of like the bookends into everything that it is that Hannah is saying, or what she is praying, or what she is singing, or what she is giving praise for. And it becomes a phenomenal reading. And I have to tell you that that it just brings out her beauty, and it brings out also the idea of what her relationship was with God. And I want to kind of bring this down in the idea of that God being a transactional God to some extent. And so there's this idea of two things, that there's this idea of transcendence and God's economy. And so how am I going to, I've been thinking about this all day. How am I going to bring the idea of this transcendence and this economy of God? Because I think both of them play into our lives in a big way. Let's talk about transcendence first. Oftentimes, if you've gone back and if you followed me for a while, you know that I often go back and there's certain verses or texts that I go back to that become bedrock, foundational truths that I use to teach. One of those comes out of Psalm 13, and it's the prayer of lament. And it's the prayer, how long, O Lord, will you forget me? How long, O Lord, will you look the other way? How long, O Lord, must I wrestle with my thoughts, and every day have such sorrow in my heart? Second movement, look on me and answer, O God, my Father. Bring light to my darkness, lest they see me fall. The third move, no matter what happens, but I will trust in your unfailing love because you have been good to me. And there's the idea that here's David in the presence of his enemies saying, how long, O Lord, is it going to take for you to deliver me? How long must I look, must you look the other way? And he demands an answer of God. He says, God, I want to be heard from you. Look on me and answer. Bring light to my dark. I'm dark. I'm in the dark about what's going on here. Bring light to the situation, lest they see me fall. And in the end, he transcends in his own prayer his circumstance, his own reality, and he begins to look to God. And no matter what's going on this level, on the human level, on the natural level, he says, but I'm going to trust in your unfailing love because you've always been good to me. At that point, he then transcends his predicament. It's no longer about his predicament. It's no longer about his world, but it becomes about this idea of transcending that world and seeing God at work in the very processes and in the circumstance of what's happening in David's life at that time. Well, I want to suggest that there's a part here where Hannah actually came in this place where she had a transcendent experience with God, or a transcendental experience with God. And what that basically is if we go back to her story, she's here been barren for years. Her sister wife is doing nothing but tormenting her, talking, or put in modern day terms, talking trash about the fact that she's not able to bear a child. And she's so desperate that what she does, and she's in the midst of it, she's in the midst of her pain. She's not in a good way. She's not enjoying the feasts that they're having, enjoying the family life because she's barren. And that's a stigma for a Jewish woman at that time. So, what she does in the middle of that is she then turns to her affliction and she's asking, in some cases, the same thing: how long, O God, will you forsake me? How long will you look the other way? Look on me and answer, O God, my Father. Bring light to my darkness. It's the same exact movement to some extent. And so what you see in Hannah is she's got this desperation, and she's looking at two things. She's looking at the oppression, she's looking at the fact that she's barren, and she's looking at her circumstance, and she's looking at it through her own eyes and her own desperation. It was so intense with her that Eli thinks she's drunk. And Eli looks at her, and Eli simply makes the statement, he says, "Why are you here and drunk in the temple? Go away and sober up." And she says, "No, I'm afflicted and I'm here seeking the direction of God. And I'm asking God the question, how long, O Lord, will you forget me? How long, O Lord, will you look the other way? How long, O Lord, must I wrestle with my thoughts and every day have such sorrow in my heart? And I'm here before God right now saying, look on me and answer, O God, my Father, bring light to my darkness, lest my sister wife see me fall." At that point, Eli simply looks at her and says, "May the Lord do it, according to you unto his will." And at that point, there's this point in Hannah's life where she realizes it's time to stop praying and it's time to relax and begin to thank God for what it is that he's going to do. It's that transition where she realizes that her destiny isn't in her hands, that her destiny isn't in what she can physically do, what she can achieve. Her destiny in this impossible situation, if it was going to be changed, needed to be changed by God. And by looking to God and trusting in God, trusting the fact that God is a good God and surely he'll bring goodness to my life, she's able to rest in God. In other words, she got over her problem and began to look to God for the answer and the solution. In the end, she gives birth, the Lord hears, the Lord remembers, she conceives, and she gives birth, and she gives that child back to God in a spirit of worship and exaltation and praise to Him. And with that, now we're going to read this song, which deals with, I think, in an interesting way, with God's economy as opposed to human economy. I kind of want to couch it in those terms here for a minute and see if I can't tease something out of it. Let's see if I can't hot rod this a little bit, because you'll probably get sick and tired of watching this video if it goes much longer than all in 30 minutes. And so I always try to keep it down to less than that 30 minutes, right? Okay, what have I got going here? Which way did my Bible go? Uh-oh. There you go. There you go. Let's see if I can pull it out without having to dig around for it. Ha, I got it. Okay. So remember I talked about her horn being exalted. And that's really what this psalm is about. It's about the fact that after she transcends and God delivers, there's this sense where she understands that God is her strength and that his glory is the lifter of her head. She's exalted and lifted up in her head, from the posture of looking down at her problem to looking up to God and giving him praise and honor and adoration and glory for what it is that God had accomplished in her. She knew she couldn't accomplish it. She knew it wasn't in her power. And she knew that when God answered, the only response she could have is praise and worship and honor to my God and my Father. Although Father wasn't really brought in this text. So this is our song. This is our song of praise. Listen to how beautiful this is because there's so much being said in this. If you get the chance to read this, read it 10 times over the next 10 days and just see what God will reveal to you out of this beautiful, beautiful song of hers. It says, Then Hannah prayed and said, My heart exalts in the Lord. My horn is exalted in the Lord. My mouth speaks boldly against my enemies because I rejoice in your salvation. There is no one holy like the Lord. Indeed, there is no one besides you, nor is there any rock like our God. Boast no more so very proudly. Do not let arrogance come out of your mouth. For the Lord is a God of knowledge, and with him actions are weighed. The bows of the mighty are shadowed, but the feeble gird on strength. Those who were full of those who were full hire themselves out for bread, but those who are hungry ceased to hunger. Even the barren gives birth to seven, but she who has many children languishes. The Lord kills and makes alive. He brings down to Sheol and he raises up. The Lord makes poor and rich. He exalts the low. He also exalts. He raises the poor from the dust. He lifts the needy from the ash heap to make them sit with nobles and inherit a seat of honor. For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and he set the world on them. He keeps the feet of his godly ones, but the wicked ones are silenced in darkness. For not by might shall a man prevail. Those who contend with the Lord will be shattered. Against them he will thunder in the heavens. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth, and he will give strength to the king. He will exalt the horn of his anointed. Wow. Wow. There's a lot there. There's a few things that she's saying in there, though, and in the psalm that I think give it its structure. And I think that this kind of becomes what I'm talking about when I talk about the divine currency of God as opposed to the currency of men. The first thing that she talks about is she talks about and she gives God this praise and this honor. And she's simply saying, I asked of the Lord, and he gave of the Lord. And because of that, my horn is exalted. My strength is exalted. It's up. It's built up. It's edified. And my glory is edified because I'm no longer barren. But with all of that God did for me, and by God exalting me in this section, I want to tell you something that we have nobody else but Him, and He becomes our rock. And when God becomes our rock, when God becomes our salvation, we're no longer working in a natural and a human economy. We're not looking to our natural strength. We're not looking to our natural abilities to achieve those things that God wants us to achieve. She goes in on talks the second part of that, where she kind of talks about where it is that people put their trust. The first thing is to exalt God and to recognize Him as her fortress, her shield, her rock, her salvation. The second thing is almost asking a question of who is it that you boast in? Who is it where you find your strength? Because don't you know that the arrogant will be brought low, and those that walk in lowly places will be brought high? Where is it that you're putting your trust? Are you putting trust in yourself? Or are you putting your trust in God? One of the things in our society that we do today, and what we find so often is we find that in our own world in which we live, that we rely on our own intellect, our own knowledge, all of the knowledge that we have within our society, as if that's going to answer every single problem that we have. And the problem is that the world has grown so much in their own intellect that they've forgotten about God and they become arrogant, thinking that they no longer need God. We see this often in science, especially when we're talking about scientism, where everything can be explained by science. And what Hannah is doing to some extent, she's really kind of criticizing us, critiquing us, if you would say it, interrogating us, basically saying, who is it that you trust in? Do you trust in your own arrogance? Do you trust in your own strength? Are you trusting in your own ability to do something? Are you trusting in your own wealth? Because I want to tell you something that's different than trusting in God. And I want to tell you that both of those different things have different ends and they have different means that are incompatible with one another. The next thing that she goes back into is you have this idea of praise first. The second thing of who is it that you're putting your trust in? And then the third part of that is simply divine currency. And this is what I want to talk about when I talk about God's economy. And basically she's saying the things that are dead, God can bring to life. The things that are rich, God can make poor. The things that are poor, God can make rich. The things that are strong, he can make weak. The things that are weak, he can make strong. And she ends it all by saying simply this: who can contend with the Lord? Who can match the Lord's strength? Knowledge, wisdom, grace, mercy, and goodness. Basically, the end of it all, she's saying all of your thoughts, all of your strength, everything that you are will ultimately come under the judgment of a God who is so much bigger, so much greater, and so much more powerful than any of you. But at the end of the day, I want to tell you something. It's him that will exalt your horn, and it's him that will exalt the horn of his king and of his servant. And with that, she basically closes out with this idea of I'm exalted, or may God be glorified. Here's the economy of God, and why I think that I've been thinking about this and why this becomes so important when we talk about transcending our natural economy. We live in a world, and our world is so high stressed with everything that's going on in the world, everything that's going on politically, everything that's going on when we think even about we think about our government and all the shifts that are going on, the changing of our presidency. We've got the war going on in Iraq, not Iraq, in Ukraine. We've got the war going on with Gaza and with Israel. We've got a shift change in Syria. We've got a shift, a political shift also in Iran. We've also got our own problems over here with the idea of Greenland. We're going to purchase Greenland and the Panama Canal. And we've got all of these different things going on. And we can get so glued and locked into these things that they sometimes we find ourselves in this mode of stress or this mode of fear because we're trading in the currency of human knowledge and human power and strength. The difference in Hannah's life, and I think the difference in our Christian life, is when we can transcend this world and all that's going on in this world, look to God for the answer, and know this: that God's the one that brings back to life that which is dead. And it doesn't matter if you're strong or you're weak, when you look to God, God will answer. But if you find yourself humbled, if you find yourself fearful, if you find yourself weak, if you find yourself drained, if you find that you can't make a provision for yourself, but you have a faith and a trust and an experience that you've had with God that basically causes you to look to God and say, but you're my strength, you're my salvation, you're my rock, you're my source, that you no longer live in the same economy. You no longer live in the same world and with the same worldview. Now, that doesn't sound like it's that important, but I want to tell you that that's the difference between overcoming this world and not overcoming this world. Here's the rub, and I'm going to close with this. The only way that you can get to where you understand that type of an economy in God is not intellectually. It's experientially. It's about going through things in your life where your life might be in such darkness, and you might even be like Hannah, where there's a barrenness about you, that there's just this emptiness about you, that things aren't going anywhere. And because of that, or an oppression is on you, or whatever the case may be, whatever this big problem is that you can't overcome. And I want to tell you something, that when you're in that, if you stay in that and you live with that and you try to fix it, you come to the end of the end of yourself and realize, I can't do it. I can't change it. I'm just in this dark place. God, where are you? That if you turn to God in the midst of that, and you look towards God and you say, how long, O Lord? How long will you forget me? How long will you look the other way? And you stay there and say, look on me and answer, oh God, my Father, bring light to my darkness. That I want to tell you that when you're there and you begin to transcend in that prayer life and you begin to say, but I trust in your unfailing love, and you begin to put your trust in God, you're no longer working in the same economy. You're no longer working with the same worldview that you used to, because now your worldview is simply this: my world may be dark, but God. I may be in ill health, but God. I may be financially destitute, but God. I may be fearful. I may be stressful, but God. I'm going to look to you in your unfailing love. I want to tell you something. There's a lot of Christians that never figure that out. There's a lot of Christians that never live in that world, in that realm. And I want to tell you that we as Pentecostal Christians should live in that realm more than others, because we have this openness to God and the fact that we want to be, or that God can surprise us by his power and his might and his miracle working love in our lives if we'll trust him. What I want to tell you is maybe time for us to turn off the TV a little bit more, spend a little bit more time in prayer. And rather than listening at all and looking at all the circumstances that are going on around us, look at the fact that God is bigger than all of those, and I'm not going to be depressed. I want to tell you something, that when we walk in that, with that kind of an attitude and with that kind of a prayer life and that kind of a praise life, there's nothing in this world that can touch us, because we no longer belong to a natural worldly economy, but the economy of God that never fails and is always superabundant in his grace, mercy, and love. I don't know if I did that justice. I don't know if I can, I don't even know if I can begin to understand it, because I think this is so big. The fact that the lowly he exalts, and those that are arrogant he humbles. But that's God's economy. That's the way God works. It's ironic, I know. And that's why it's important for us as Christians to trust in his unfailing love. And when we do, and when you do, your horn will be exalted. Your strength and glory will be upon you. And with that, you'll turn it back to God, recognizing him as your rock and your salvation. I hope you'll say yes. I hope this will speak to you. God bless, and have a great day.